Item number 13, file number Z-8503-D, Herrick Heights, long form PDR, located on the west side of South Bowman Road between Brody Creek subdivision and the point at Brody Creek Apartments. On October 8, 2015, the Commission denied a request to rezone 23 acres of an overall larger tract from R2 single family to planned development residential to allow the construction of 400-plus units of multifamily housing. The developer had indicated an overall development plan, including boundary street improvements to South Bowman Road and a commitment to develop the northern portion of the property as single family. The rezoning request did not include the entire 70 acres, and there was no means for staff to enforce the developer's proposal. The project currently being considered by the Commission is approximately 70 acres located on the west side of South Bowman Road between the Brody Creek subdivision and the point at Brody Creek Apartments. The request is to rezone the site from R2 single family to planned development residential to allow the approval of the zoning and a site plan for 408 units of multifamily housing, future development of age-restricted residential or single family and O1 quiet office district. The multifamily portion of the development is in addition to the existing 600 units located to the south of the site. The acreage of the site is approximately 24 acres. This development is proposed containing 408 units. There is an emergency access which will also serve as the exit drive along the property's southern boundary to allow egress of the residents of the development. All ingress is from the existing drive serving the point at Brody Creek Apartments. An area along the northern perimeter is indicated on the site plan for future development of single-family or age-restricted housing. The area of this portion of the site contains roughly 27 acres. The development of this area will include detached single-family, which will conform to the development criteria of the R2 single-family zoning district. If developed as attached, age-restricted housing, the density will not exceed 6 units per acre. The applicant has indicated the future use of the non-residential portion of the site, which is located adjacent to South Bowman Road. The acreage is approximately 11 acres, and the applicant has indicated this area will develop with uses as allowed in the O1 quiet office zoning district. In addition to O1, the applicant is requesting the allowance of a nursing home or a convalescent home or attached residential homes at a density not to exceed 6 units per acre. Within the 70-acre tract, the proposal includes maintaining roughly 12 acres, which is located within the floodway or has been designated on the site plan as open space. These buffer areas are along the northern, eastern, and western perimeters of the proposed multifamily development area. The minimum width of the open space buffer will be 50 feet. The site plan also includes an area along South Bowman Road, which will be retained as open space buffer should the area develop with residential uses. The open space buffer, for the most part, are to remain in the natural state unless approved for modification by the city. Within the buffer areas, recreational uses by adjacent residents will be allowed. Construction of walks, walking paths, parks, and playgrounds will also be allowed. The development of the multifamily is proposed in 4 phases. Phase 1 includes the construction of 5 buildings and a pool and pool house. Phase 2 includes the construction of 2 additional buildings. Phase 3, construction of 7 buildings. In the final phase, 3 buildings will be constructed. The development is contained with 17 buildings, 24 units per building. Within the development, there are 190 units with 1 bedroom, 172, and 48 with 3 bedrooms. Construction will begin in June of 2016, with units coming online in 2017 through 2020. Within the units coming online in 2017, 120 units with 96 units in the subsequent years. With the construction of the first phase of the apartments, the street improvements to South Bowman Road will be completed adjacent to the 70-acre site. These improvements include half-street construction to master street plan standard. The certificate of occupancy for the first phase of the apartments will not be issued until the street construction is completed. The request includes a variance from the city's land alteration ordinance to allow grading of the entire multifamily site with the development of the first phase of the apartments. The applicant has stated the grading is necessary to allow the site to balance. The applicant has indicated grading will not be visible from South Bowman Road, and any visual impact of the clearing will only be seen from within the existing apartment development. The tract adjacent to South Bowman Road will not be cleared or graded until the area is part of a development plan where construction is imminent. The applicant has engaged a traffic engineer to review and prepare a traffic analysis for this development and the potential impact of this development on South Bowman Road. Staff has reviewed the results of this traffic study and feels the increase in traffic from the proposed development will impact the existing traffic on Bowman Road. The developer is making improvements to Bowman Road beyond those improvements required by the city code. Prior to the CO for Phase 1 of the apartment development, Bowman Road will be improved from O's Lane on the north to 36th Street on the south. Existing traffic on Bowman Road is an issue today and will remain an issue until the entire corridor of Bowman Road south of the Canis Road intersection is improved to Master Street Plan standard. Staff feels the request is an acceptable request. The developer is proposing to develop the site with a unified development plan, which includes a mixture of uses, including single and multifamily, with the potential of other housing types located within the development. With the current request, staff can enforce several commitments made to the developer with regard to the future development of the remaining acreage. Although traffic on South Bowman Road is a concern, the development of the new apartments will not significantly alter the existing condition. Staff recommends approval of the request, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions as outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F of the agenda staff report. Staff recommends approval of the variance request from the city's land alteration ordinance to allow advanced grading of the future multifamily development area with the issuance of a building permit for the first phase of the apartments. Once again, we need 2 votes, 1 vote for the requested rezoning and the second for the land alteration variance request.
Thank you, Ms. James. Would the applicant like to come forward, please?
Commissioner Dillon, Chairman Dillon, Commissioners, my name is Tim Daters. I'm a consultant engineer with White Daters & Associates. Walter, could you put that, I really can't add anything to Donna's description of the project. She's accurately described what we proposed and are considering at this point. We did put a color graph together so you could see the different areas a little bit better oriented with north being up. The upper area is the proposed residential area, which will not be developed as multifamily. The purple or lavender area, I guess matching my shirt, is a quiet O1 office uses on Bowman Road, the minor arterial. The orange color is the actual expansion of the apartment complex itself, and you can see the buildings and the way they're oriented. And then the green areas are open space and creek and floodway buffers, which are also part of this application and will also be rezoned at this time. We've also said that the minimum buffer width will be 50 feet at any location, and that there will be at least, I believe it's roughly 12 acres of buffers and open space proposed project. The multifamily portion of the project, the first phase that will be completed, is approximately 700 feet from the homes that you see on the west, across 700 feet of woods and approximately 200 feet of actually zoned open space. It's separated from the existing Woodlands Edge and Brody Creek community on the north by approximately 500 feet of future single-family development and 50 feet of zoned open space buffer. Walt, would you do the next slide? On this side, we just simply overlaid, this is the existing land use plan that does show approximately 30 acres of the site as residential medium density. And you could just go back one, Walter, and leave it on that. And that's basically, be available for any questions. With me also is Keith Richardson, the developer, and Mr. Ernie Peters, who's performed our traffic studies. And I think Keith would like to add some comments.
Okay, thank you. Hi.
Good afternoon. Keith Richardson with Richardson Properties. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our project. We built the first phase of the Point at Brody Creek at 3400 South Bowman in 2012, and our final units came online in 2015. We feel like we've built the best apartment Class A project that's been built to date in Little Rock. We've got an extensive waiting list for tenants wanting to move into our project with no available units to accommodate them. And I also would like to share with the Commission kind of the background to this. We weren't looking to expand the Point Brody Creek, but our next door neighbor, Ms. Spatz, that has the 70-acre tract that we have under contract, she's actually owned the property for 71 years. So I never thought that she would be willing to sell her property, because we've talked to her, I guess, at least 10 different times over the last 5 years at her dinner table about our project as we expanded. But her realtor contacted me, and she made a decision to sell the property. And obviously, with me being a multifamily developer and have the project next door and the project across the street, I was very concerned that if I didn't purchase this property, some other multifamily developer from out of state probably would, because the future land use, as you can see from the map, is multifamily, the 30 acres. With us, we obviously are going to develop it as multifamily as well. But we have such a major investment. We've invested, when we finish with Bowman to Point across the street, over $135 million in the area. So we've certainly invested with the area, just like all of our neighbors. One of the issues or concerns that the neighbors had is how it's going to look from the street, from Bowman, the traffic. With our development coming through our existing entrances, it'll never be visible from Bowman as when we take the trees down or as we build this. And after meeting with Woodlands Edge and the Brody Creek HOAs, we've made several concessions to try to get their support. And I'll just kind of walk through a couple of those with you. Once again, we agreed to build the project in the back of the 70-acre tract. The entrances through our existing entrances. We agreed to restrict the balance of the property to never be developed anything other than single family or the O1 use available. We also agreed to do the $500,000 to $750,000 of half-street improvements before we ever open up our first phase. And as Donna had stated, we agreed to stagger the development, whereas someone from out of state would come in and build 300 units regardless of what the market is. For us, we've got a vested interest, so we're willing and agreeing to not open the first phase, which is 120 units, until 2017, and then 96 units each year up to 2020. And that's the maximum number. Keep in mind, if we hit a point to where our weakness in the market, if our occupancy level starts falling below 95%, we're done. We're stopping. So after the 120 units, if we have weakness in the market, if too many apartments are built, we'll sit there and we'll wait till the market tells us that there's continued demand for additional units. Then we'll come back and try to build some units. So I think that is something that no other multifamily developer can offer to the area and to the community. And once again, we'll have spent almost $2 million in public improvements to the improvements on Bowman Road and at 36th Street as well. And so we're here to ask the Planning Commission to allow us to continue to expand our property and protect our investment, because we're concerned if we don't do the development, if this falls through, some other developer will continue to come back to the Planning Commission, to the council, to get approval to build it, because the future land use is obviously multifamily. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Let's go through our cards, and then we'll give you a chance to come back up. First, Ms. Ruth Bell, please.
I'm still Ruth Bell with the League of Women Voters, and this time around I'm not actively opposing this application, although to me it looks like a pretty dense multifamily development if you're just looking at that particular tract and the number of units that will be on it. What I'm really concerned about is, as you recall well over the past 4 or 5 months, you have heard a number of applications in the Canis Road area and south along the streets that feed off Canis, of a number of apartment complexes, and a great many residents appearing and being very upset about the numbers of apartment complexes that were being proposed in that particular area. We're concerned about that too. And at that time, there was a lot, over those 2 or 3 months, there was a lot of discussion both by people on the mic here and amongst you all up there about the undesirability of having a whole bunch of multifamily all together. And you were, unfortunately, by my book, referred a lot to Reservoir Road, which is heavily multifamily and was also the home of my own church. So I didn't know how to take that particularly, personally. But since there does seem to be a concern both amongst the public and amongst some of you about concentrating multifamily, and since you are seeing a number of multifamily applications in this area, which seems to be apparently ripe for multifamily growth, we, the league, would very much like you to undertake to look into what kind of zoning or planning would best deal with those concerns. Because remember, we don't particularly as a city make sure that when we put down a lot of population, we also put down a lot of road to carry the population. That in and of itself would be worth a lot of conversation. What I think I'm asking you is to consider directing your staff and perhaps involving some of the people from that area who have ongoing concerns about population density and multifamily zoning to work and see if they can come up with some suggestions for you to consider making part of your ordinances. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. David Shipley, please.
Hello, I'm David Shipley. I'm a resident of Woodlands Edge. I got the short end of the stick. A lot of my neighbors asked me to speak or asked one of us to speak, and here I am. I'm here really to express our opposition to this complex, and really, get my little cheat sheet here. Two things. One, I'd like to ask that the board put a moratorium on apartments along South Bowman and Canis. South Bowman, the traffic on South Bowman, and particularly in the morning and rush hour, is horrendous. It took me 5 minutes to pull out of Brody Creek this morning, trying to take my kid to school. We're on a tight schedule. I got to get him to school, get my other kid to his school, and then get to work by 8 o'clock. So we're having to leave earlier and earlier to do that. And I know there were probably 5 or 6 cars stacked up behind me, and that's at 7:15, 7:20 in the morning. So the traffic is a large concern of this. But in the long run, it's kind of a greater Little Rock thing, is that we have apartments going on North Canis. We have apartments going on South Bowman. There's one down at Colonel Glenn. There's now a great wasteland between Brody Creek and Rock Creek Church. It looks like a bomb went off down there. And what that's doing to our neighborhood, it concerns me that our property values will be ultimately affected, that we're creating a crime of corridor as these apartment complexes age. What happens in time is that they're no longer really luxury. They're just old apartments, and they become Section 8 housing. I saw this in Tulsa. I work in at Central Mortgage Company. I'm in the REO claims area. We service over $33 billion of mortgages. When we foreclose on houses for investors, my job is, in my group, what we do is we dispose of those properties. And I look at properties all over the country every day, and that's what you see in developments when good neighborhoods get surrounded by apartments on all sides, and those property values decrease. And it's a slow rot, it's a slow decay, if you will, but it puts a burden on the people that live in the neighborhood and our investments. Two, I mentioned traffic. The other big issue that we all have is that a lot of us feel like our property owners associations have kind of railroaded this thing. We didn't really know about it until earlier this week. There was a last-minute meeting last night. Very few people could attend to it. It didn't come out until in the afternoon that we were talking about it. But they're kind of presenting it like, this is your only choice. You better take it or leave it or else, kind of a thing. And that's not the way we do business in this country. There's no transparency. There's no, everything should be above books. It almost looks like there's a collusion going on between the developers and the POAs who said they've given, approval of this, and that's not really the case. If that's my objections, my main objections to it. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it. Again, several of my neighbors, we all have kids, we all have 2 jobs. When they found out about it, they're all very upset about it and concerned about what is happening on the north end of Canis, because it's also hard to turn out of Canis going left towards Chenal Parkway. That can take a long time too. And until the city can really put the infrastructure in, let's think about how we're developing these corridors, make them attractive places for all of us to live. Our property values will remain steady. Apartments aren't the answer. And besides, I think from the way I understand it, this is not zoned for multifamily. The zoning is now single-family residence only. Is that correct? Okay, so he's wrong in that there is a multifamily aspect to this. So we would like that zoning to remain as it is, the property be developed as single-family.
Thank you. And Mr. Richardson, would you like to address his concerns, please?
Is that the only comment?
Yes.
Yes, I would like to respond to the three items. In concern for the property values, one thing that's a little bit different with our company than most multifamily developers, we have developed 70 projects over the last 15 years. Every single project that I've ever built, I still own. So we're not a developer that comes in, short term, builds it, sells it, and moves on to the next deal. We've got an extensive replacement reserve every single month that we put into our properties. And he mentioned possibly Section 8 housing. That couldn't be further from the truth. Our one bedrooms start at over $1,000 a month. Our three bedrooms are $1,600 a month. That's as much as a lot of people's mortgages in that area. Once again, we have spent over $130,000 per unit for every single apartment complex we built there. We will maintain them. We have to maintain them with the mortgage that we have on there. So that is not a question. Our management team is locally and North Little Rock that oversees our daily activities on the property at the staff level, and then our corporate office is back in Maumelle. And as far as railroading with the property owners, and I'm sorry you feel that way, because I've actually met with the HOAs for the last 3 months on several occasions. We made the notifications just like the city requires. Had multiple conversations with them in person on the phone to address all the concerns. I can't say that they didn't communicate with all of the members. I only know that I needed to deal directly with the HOA, and that's what I did. And as far as the single family, that is true. It is single family, but the future land use for the property that's been there for several years states that it'll be eventually a multifamily destination zoning on it. So, I'm sorry.
Okay, can you address the meeting last night?
Yes, I got a call, I guess the day before, late afternoon, said that the Woodlands Edge and Brody Creek would like you to come back in one more time. And I said, no problem at all. So I cleared my schedule. I went in last night. We spent about 2 hours. I tried to address all the concerns and any questions that both residents had. And we had, I would say, 40 members, maybe 45 members that actually showed up there last night at the meeting. And then of the 45, we've got 2 people that showed up here tonight, so hopefully we addressed the majority of their concerns last night.
Okay, thank you. Do y'all have any questions or concerns for any of the team there?
Just to clarify, I'm looking at Mr. Greg Jones' email here. Woodlands Edge Association is still in support of this item, of this application, just to clarify.
That's my understanding also.
That was the email that we received today.
But they don't have a representative here tonight to speak?
They don't. It was my understanding he was going to be here. Not sure what happened.
Okay. I spoke extensively about this item when it came up previously.
Say something about that.
I'll defer to Madam Chair on that.
Really, you're supposed to have already said everything that you have to say.
I understand. I just wanted to add that.
You've got to come to the microphone.
Absolutely. Sorry. I just wanted to add that we have not gotten one piece of mail, one email from our property owners.
To the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
We haven't gotten one piece of mail, one email from our Property Owners Association about this proposed development. It only came to us kind of out of happenstance that we found out about it. And here we are 2 days before this meeting trying to figure out what to do, and everyone is actually in shock that this is being considered and that our own Property Owners Association has signed off on this as the best alternative. So That's really an issue for the property owners association.
Right.
But there's that element to that, and that's the part of the anger and frustration. Our property owners association has just kind of taken over from the developer, from what I understand. So there's probably a lot of issues to work out how it functions. There's a lot of other things they haven't told us about either. But that is one of our concerns about that. So.
And I understand what you're saying, although we have no control
Oh, I know.
over the POA.
And that's not an issue for you all to decide. But I'm saying
Right.
there's an issue of notice, and to say that, Woodlands Edge absolutely approves this is not necessarily the case. I think you were to talk to the residents of Woodlands Edge and put it to a
We
vote.
can only go by the emails and letters
I
that we
understand.
get. Okay, or who shows up.
Sure.
Okay.
And Mr. Jones didn't show up, did he?
Right, thank you. Okay,
Thank you,
Mr.
Sarah.
Levis.
Appreciate it. I can understand your frustration there. This item, to me, has a lot of strengths. As we all know, when an apartment multifamily application comes before us, we normally have a room full of people that we have to deal with that are angry with normally pitchforks and very emotional. And it's unique to have this type of application where the POA does support it. And again, we do note your request. And however, I would like to point out a few things that I pointed out last time, just due to the topography. To the south of this site, you can see the water of the creek there that is running through. There's going to be, as multifamily is why a lot of people don't want to live near multifamily for obvious reasons. That area will not be developed because it's in the flood zone and area, and residential area to the south and really to the southwest, as well as to the southeast due to 430, as well as the church there to just the east, will not be impacted because there's not going to be any residential areas in that map. As you can see clearly in the map, there's all of it's to the north. And with the community to the north supporting, I think that's something that obviously we will strongly consider. Also, if you could go to the other slide that shows the buffer and the green space, part of what Mr. Jones' email says is that in the reason that the POA did support it was the amount of green space there to the north in that proposed residential area. And Mr. Jones also noted the number of units built, as well as the deed restriction and staggering of the improvements as well. I know that many have compared this area to Reservoir Road, but for those reasons, as well as for the reasons of the quality of development, for the ability of this type of development to be remodeled and maintained in a different way than even 25 years from now, that this property can be maintained in a different way than Reservoir Road because of the way it was designed, I'm going to support this request.
Thank you, Mr. Bevis. Ms. Finney, did you have something?
I was just going to say that I've received a lot of calls on this application as well, and I'm very disappointed that the residents didn't show up to express their opposition as they did by phone.
I agree with that. Any questions? Well, you didn't fill out a card. Okay, come on up. Okay, you're up.
I am another resident of Woodlands Edge, and my name is Joy Fogarski, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, especially that you didn't have to. Thank you very much. I can tell you that what Mr. Shipley said is accurate in that we really, the residents, I understand the POA has been in communication, and I certainly respectfully understand that's, your obligation to communicate with them. We really found out within the last 48 hours, we meaning all of the residents within Brody Creek and Woodlands Edge. People were sort of panicked, to be very honest. There was a lot of informal communication. The meeting was called last night because the residents really were up in arms, and I'm not sure people understood what to expect. A lot of people really felt like it was a done deal and they had been railroaded. And respectfully, Mr. Richardson's development, for a multi-use development, it sounds very high quality. I think our concerns, to go back to Mr. Shipley, are really a larger one that I would say of asking for consideration of some kind of a moratorium to do a larger study due to what seems like a significant amount of development of multi-use housing right around our development. Canis, the ones on Canis border our development on the other side, right near that Canis Road exit. And this one, obviously, we know that. I won't repeat it. And so it really is apartments coming up sort of surrounding our development. People bought there because the development won green awards and promised 75%, if it's not exactly that, I'm close, would remain green space. So people spent a lot of their hard-earned family money and took out mortgages buying in that area very much specifically because of what that development advertised and stood for. And so respectfully, my comments and my opposition, and I do oppose it, are really a larger opposition, not of that development personally, but of asking that the commission consider doing some larger study of just the multi-use development going in that specific area for the reasons that have already been stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on. And you are?
James Aronson. I didn't bring the card up initially because this is the first time I've been to a planning commission meeting. I'm very impressed. You're all doing your job well. As a citizen, I live in Brody Creek. I was present for the meeting last night, and Mr. Richardson was very, very patient with some irate people that were there. The gentleman to my right is correct that as a member of the POA of Brody Creek, I had no idea until I got the certified letter that this was happening, and then through the Woodlands people I was able to learn some of this. The Woodlands board at the meeting last night did, I think, meet with Mr. Richardson, but it was clear that they did not communicate that to the members of the Woodland community. So you can't be responsible for the poor politics in our neighborhoods. I would like to propose a compromise here because I think, my understanding, I don't quite understand, is this multifamily or single family? I don't quite understand what is the jurisdiction. My understanding from Mr. Richardson was that this was zoned somehow as multifamily, and now I'm hearing maybe it's not. So if that's one of the items that you're voting on, then I think you should listen to the residents of the Woodlands that have spoken. But as a compromise, Mr. Richardson seems to be much more responsible than perhaps most developers, although I may be quite naive. I would like to simply ask, I was talking to the traffic engineer, and I'm not sure, I read his 24-page report that Mr. Richardson emailed me an hour before this meeting. The traffic projections, I think, are under-projected, and maybe one potential solution would be, since Mr. Richardson has so generously contributed $1.5 million to widening roads, maybe he could contribute $180,000 to put a traffic light up at Brody Creek and Bowman.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Peters, would you like to come up and talk about the traffic for a minute, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Dillon, and Commissioners. Ernie Peters, the Peters Associates Engineers. We have done a great deal of study relative to this project and have met and conferred and emailed and corresponded and done it again with staff, and we are pleased that staff has finally gotten to the
gotten to the position of being supportive on this project, and I think that that's appropriate. To address the traffic concerns, and I did speak very briefly with Dr. Aronson before the meeting, and tried to explain to him the basis that we use for estimating traffic associated with developments such as this. I'm not sure that I've effectively communicated that, but I believe that this commission has heard from me before that we typically use the national standards that are compiled by the Institute of Transportation Engineers for trip generation values. We did that in this case, and Dr. Aronson had mentioned to me that he questioned some value of 50 vehicles being the value of what would be generated by the development during the peak hour. And I looked back after I sat down this afternoon, and that value's not there. That would understate what the traffic associated with the development is. We've outlined that in the report, and just for full disclosure, I'll call that out as to what it is. This particular development, as Mr. Richardson has pointed out, is proposed to be developed in phases, but in its whole, once it's developed, it will generate, as a result of the 408 units, in our estimation, a 24-hour volume of about 2,700 vehicles per day. Some of that occurs during the AM peak hour, some occurs during the PM peak hour. We focus on that typically for assessment. The numbers for the AM peak hour are 42 entering, 166 exiting at full build, not year by year, but at full build. And during the PM peak hour, 164 entering, 89 exiting. So whatever number Dr. Aronson locked in on there, it wasn't a proper understanding of what we had set out to do. I'd like to point out that there are acknowledged problems. The city staff and I and the developer have all recognized that there are problems along Bowman Road relative to traffic. Traffic volumes increase as you go further north. However, this developer, both on the west and the east sides of Bowman Road, is more than mitigating the impact of the additional traffic associated with the development. One question was raised about the possibility of a traffic signal at the intersection of Brody Creek and Bowman Road. We looked at that. The volumes currently are not sufficient to meet the minimum criteria set out in the manual and uniform traffic control devices for a traffic signal there. We also looked at Cherry Side, the next significant intersection to the north. They're not sufficient there either. We did determine that with background growth and with the full build of this development and the other that has been approved by the commission, that in year 2020, one warrant, the peak hour warrant for traffic signal control, would be met at the Brody Creek intersection. At that time, the city could consider installing a signal at that time. They likely would not consider installing a signal or allowing anyone else to prior to the time that the minimum criteria or warrants as specified in the manual and uniform traffic control devices is met. The intersection of Cherry Creek further north continues to not meet warrants even at year 2020. So I've given you some information, probably more than the minute you suggested, Chairman Dillon, and I appreciate your indulgence on that. But I'd be glad to answer any particular questions concerning what we've done, what we've studied, what we've found, should there be any.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Peters. Does anyone have any traffic questions for Mr. Peters?
I do have a question for Mike Hood with this traffic, if you don't mind, Mr. Peters. Let me just say I appreciate you respecting No Shave November, just like Tim Daters has. I'm sorry many don't share that with us.
Thank you.
Mr. Peters mentioned that in his projections for Brody Creek being warranted for a traffic light, which is a legal process for justifying a traffic light, 2020 his estimate. Is that kind of within your reason?
I don't know the projection exactly. I trust his information. I do know that what he says is correct. Even though there is a delay in the morning is the only warrant that's met right now that would warrant a signal. And generally, you need to meet more than one criteria to get a signal installed. There is some delay in the morning.
Okay. Thank you. I do have a question or two for Mr. Richardson real quickly. You know, multifamily is now the darling investment nationally and locally because household economics have changed since recession. And if 7 p.m. were considered hypothetically the capacity, you've met demand and there's no more demand for multifamily.
I'm sorry, at 7 p.m.?
If 7 p.m. were the time on a clock where we've met capacity, what time are we at now? I'm trying to get a sense of this. These are challenges for us as a city planning commission on multifamily. I don't know where we are in terms of MF capacity. So
if we're talking about on a local level, I still think we have a ways to go with the amount.
You think we're at 5 o'clock versus?
I think 7 or 8 o'clock is probably an appropriate
Yeah.
time on the clock.
Yeah.
We can't seem to build the number of units that the demand is for them right now.
It's okay. I need a realtor's perspective on that. And what is it about this area that attracts multifamily investment? Is it just the aggregation economics? Is it the terrain? Is it proximity to business districts? I mean, for the record, I think people need to know kind of why they see this.
I wished I could tell you I was smart, but that's probably not the case. When we first looked at the area back over 5 or 6 years ago, we were concerned because we were the first one to really build a project here. That's the reason we ended up building a 30,000 square foot clubhouse. We felt like if we build it, hopefully they will come. But after we actually built the project, we hadn't even had our clubhouse open yet. We were 100% occupied before the clubhouse even opened. And what we've since realized is the location is super convenient. We have a lot of medical staff that actually lives there. People that live downtown likes to live there because to get onto the interstate from either Colonel Glenn or 36 is just super convenient to the interstate to get them to work, to all the restaurants, the shopping. It just seems to be a really nice part of town, a safe part of town that people want to live.
Okay, thank you.
And the occupancy kind of tells the story on the demand.
What is the occupancy right now?
100% with a waiting list.
Okay.
I will make one other note. It's concerning to me that we have one-bedroom apartments renting for $1,000 a month and 3 bedrooms for $1,600. That tells me that we have a demand problem, that we do not have enough supply if the prices are in that type of range. So the way I'm looking at it is where does multifamily need to go? And it's obvious the demand is west of 430. And most multifamily that we see has a lot more issues than this one. That's just my personal opinion and where I'm at.
And multifamily gets a bad name. I mean, and because of the old units that they don't keep up and because they don't take care of and they allow them to go down. And it's unfortunate, but it happens. It happens in every place. Yes.
Last time we heard this discussion on this project, I voted for it. Mr. Bubba's voted against it. I think we're going to swap votes tonight. I have more trouble with rezoning this property. We all agree there's too many apartments out there. I don't know where they need to go. I'm not smart either, Mr. Richardson. But if we don't want more apartments there, why are we rezoning it for more apartments? I think that pushes it somewhere where maybe there aren't this many apartments. So I'm going to change my vote, Commissioner.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns, or comments? We're ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, there's 2 motions associated with this application. The first one is the rezoning. The second one will be for the variance of the land alteration for grading. My first motion, I move for approval of the application as filed with staff recommendations.
Second.
All in favor? And all opposed? Pass. Motion passes.
The second motion is for approval of the application for a variance from the land alteration to allow for advanced grading.
All in favor? And all opposed? Motion passes. Item passes. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all for doing a great job.
Thank you. No, we don't.